You have set up your farm and you are ready to go into poultry farming, but you're wondering how much maize you do need to feed, let's say in this case, 1,000 layers. So you have got your farm ready, everything is okay, but you're wondering what's the size of feeds, in this case maize, that you require to actually feed 1,000 layers to the point of maturity. No, the point where they're actually starting laying, and which is around 4.5 months, or preferably 18 weeks. So looking at this table, as you can see, in these phases, I have different phases here. We have the starter phase. Looking at this feed formulation. Now this is the formula I've been using all throughout, and I'm still using this. Now for the first phase, that is the starter phase, you need a DCP of around, I forgot to tell you, this is the stage where it is actually between 1 and 8 weeks. So within that period, you're wondering how much maize will you require, how many bags of maize, 90 kg bags. Here in Kenya, that's how we quantify it to actually feed your birds. Let's say you have 1,000 layers. Now looking at this table, we expect a DCP of around, as you can see here, we expect a target digestible crude protein of around 20.5% or more than that. If they are broilers, you expect 22% of that in this case, in this first stage. But these are chicks, layer birds, and we don't need to actually fatten them quickly for that period. But you can do that. It's normal. It's okay. It's okay to buy maybe starter feeds for the first 1 week or 2 weeks. Now looking at this table, as you can see, we have this target of 20.5% DCP, and then the materials are there. We have the whole maize of 45 kgs. Now in this case, we have the raw materials, and then we have the the quantity that you need, and then the crude protein. This is just for showing purposes. It's not really necessarily supposed to be there. This is just for guidelines purposes. Now look at this. So you have the whole maize there. You have your wheat bran or maize germ, like that. You have your soya meal. You have your calcium, fish meal. I'm just going through them, the major ones, and then coccidostat, salt, toxin binder, methionine, lysine, cysteine. Now these amino acids are not really necessary at this particular time, so I'll focus on the main materials here which you require. Now I'm talking about the whole maize, because maize right now, it's a bit pricey. Farmers have just started harvesting their maize. Some are planting, is different depending on the region where you are. Some are planting, some are harvesting at this particular time, so the prices are a little bit high, a little bit lower, because the bag of 90 kg maize right now is going for, the most I've seen is 3,500 Kenya shillings, which is not that bad, and it's not that good at this particular time. Now depending on the quantity of birds that you have, let's say for someone who has 1,000 birds and thinking of that price, that's very high. So you have to consider the process of actually getting the maize at the lowest price possible. Maybe 2,800, 3,000, maybe that would be better. And then you stock it. Now considering that factor, you have to look at this table and then look at the quantity of maize that you need to actually make 100 kilos. If you can see, we want to make 100 kilos of feeds. This is a starter feed. Now it is assumed that we are assuming that, let me just show you this table. Yeah, we are assuming that you are starting this, you are feeding, or you are planning on the feeding from the third week. In this case, the third week, as you can see. So this is the Isa Brown rating table. Now we have the edges in weeks, like that. You have the edge in days, and then we have the feed intake per bird per day in terms of grams. So we have the minimum and the maximum that we expect, and then feed intake per bird, that is cumulative, and that means in total. And then you have the body weight there. So in this case, we are talking about the first week, which you can see the birds in the first week should be feeding a maximum of 11 grams. One chick should be feeding a maximum of 11 grams for the that's per day. Now if you multiply that per for the 7 days, you expect a total of 77 grams. Now the same goes for week 2, where we have 210 grams. That is in total. That is week 1 and week 2. We have a total of 210 grams. So that's the maximum of 19 grams times 7, and then plus the 77, you get 210 grams. Now I don't want to focus on that week 1 and week 2, because those 2 weeks I'm expecting that you have fed your chicks to maybe the feeds that you bought. So you went to a shop, you bought the feeds, maybe let's say 2 bags or 3 bags or 4 bags of that feed, and then you feed them for the first 2 weeks, so that you just gain the energy. They they get familiar with the food. They don't want to introduce them to your own mixed feeds in this case. So remember that, guys, you're talking about mixing your own feeds in this particular case, not actually buying feeds from the manufacturers. So in this case, you are mixing your own feeds. 77, this is the first week. You have that in the 77. As you can see, 77, that is the maximum feed, that is total grams per bird, per week for that particular case. And then so as I mentioned earlier, that you are ignoring the first 2 weeks because you are assuming that you have bought the commercial feeds, and then you have gave the chickens time to actually grow, pick up the pace with the feeds, and then for the first 2 weeks, and then the third week, that's when you introduce your feed. So starting from the 292 grams right there. Now from that instance alone, that is the third week all the way to the 8th week, because you have seen in our spaces that you are leading with the 8 weeks. So the first 2 weeks you're done with them. So we are remaining what? 6 weeks. So 6 weeks are remaining, and we need 45 kilos of feeds per 100 kilos of feeds, like that. So let's find out the total kilos of feeds the one chick will consume. So just open a calculator there. So like that, and then we go back to the table to actually see that is from week 3 all the way to week 8. That is, as you can see, week 8, the total consumption should be 1,883 grams per bird. That is the total. Now the total 1,883 grams per bird, that is from the, that is the maximum in terms of total, cumulative total from week 1. Now we'll just have to minus the week 2, the feeds from week 2, so that we get the total feeds one chick should have consumed within that period. So that will be, just from the table, that should be 1,883 minus 392 grams. Minus 392 grams. Minus 210 grams in total for the first 2 weeks. So when you subtract those two, you get 1,672 grams. So which means one chick should have consumed 1,672 grams of feeds. That is for the remaining 6 weeks. Now, if you multiply that by the number of chicks that you have, that is by 1,000. You see, like that. Sorry, not that. By 1,000, you should get exactly 1.6 million grams. So of course you convert this to kilos just to make it more easier. So which means we divide by 1,000, and then we're remaining with 1,672 kgs or 1.67 tons of feed. So that's the total quantity of feeds the bird should feed. You see, so the 1,000 birds you need 1,672 kilos of feeds. Now let's go back to our table and the guiding. This is more of a guiding stage, the starter phase. So look at this phase. In this phase, if you are making 100 kilos of feeds, you will need 45 kgs of maize. Now, if you're asking yourself, how much should I stock for this, maybe first 8 weeks, that means the first 2 months, how much should you stock, quantity of maize should you stock in that particular period? If you have maybe limited supply of money, or money not coming in a sequential manner, you're not really expecting money, you have to stock maize. So in this case, you'll be needing 45 kilos of maize per 100 kilos. So which means that is 45% of the feed should be maize. Now, if you take 45% of, just go back to our calculator. If you take 45% of that feeds, it means you will need, let's just multiply that by 0.45. 0.45, because this is a flat percentage, because of I've just used 100 kilos to be very sure that we get a flat percentage in that case. So if you multiply that 45% of that, which is actually the quantity of maize you'll be needing, it means you'll need 752 kilos of maize, which is understandable because that is the phase where the birds need a lot of energy, the chicks need a lot of energy, and as you can see, the target weight, the target percentage in this case is actually 20.89%. That is the target. So, of course, the chicks are young and they'll need a lot of energy at this particular time, and they'll need a lot of proteins at this particular time. So you can see I'm not talking about the soybean at this particular moment because I'm just focusing on the whole maize, which you'll need. But if you can look at the whole maize, it is 25 kilos. 25 kilos, and then the fish meal is 13 kilos. So a combination of that total should give you more than more than 30% of that. It should be in terms of proteins. Now I'll ignore the rest of the amino acids. I'll ignore that for this particular time. I'll talk about that in the later session, but let's just focus on the whole maize. So you have agreed that you have seen that is for the first 8 weeks you need 752 kilos of maize. Now if you divide that by, let's say in Kenya we get what, 90 kg bags. So if you just divide that by 90, you should get about how many bags? Let's see. So you should be able to buy about 8 bags. You need 8 bags of maize for that particular session. Now let's just do the same. The formula is just the same all the way to the third stage. Now let's go back to growers phase. Now there's a bit of pointers there. Now growers phase takes place between 9 and 16 weeks. So from the 9th week all the way to 16th week, that is a total of 8 weeks in total. So if you have done with that stage, it means you have cracked like 16 full weeks, like that. Yeah. So let's look at that. Now there are some pointers there, some important notes to note, important things to note there. We have the target digestible crude protein of around 18.5 to 16.5. Now it's a reducing DCP. A reducing DCP means the chickens in this case don't need a lot of proteins because they have grown, their structure is grown, the bone structure is grown, therefore they don't need a lot of protein at this particular time. So that's why you see the percentage of DCP has actually reduced. And then if you go to point number 2, there's a reduction in protein. Actually, that's what I was talking about. A reduction in protein and energy is necessary as the chicks have formed their skeletal. That means the bone structure. And then addition of fiber to the feeds, that is 50 kilos per 100 kgs of feeds. Now, this is just a bit of pointers, which you'll be noting in the next few lines, as you can see. So you go back to the raw materials. We have what? Raw maize, whole maize in this case. You can see the quantity has reduced to 20 kilos. You see, it was from 45 the first 8 weeks, and then the next 8 weeks should be at 20 kilos. Now, this applies even if you are using concentrates. I understand that this protein material, raw materials, may be available in different places. People who live close to the sea or to the lakes have more fish meal. You see, I'm using a bit of a fish meal there because I can acquire some, fish meal. Even though I live far away from the sea, but I can acquire some. But mostly I'll be using soya meal in my case, which in this case will need 19 kilos of that. But let's go back to the maize. That's the whole maize. That's 20 kilos. It has reduced a lot because of the reasons that I've just explained in those bullet points right there. And then you can see there's a change in the maize or wheat bran or the maize germ that you're using. It has actually gone up because at this particular time the chickens need a lot of fiber. There's a lot of fiber. They need a lot of fiber. They don't need a lot of energy at this particular time. They need a lot of fiber in their feeds. So that's why the fiber raw material has actually gone up in terms of quantity to 50 kilos. Now, if you get, you do your math right there, you get a target DCP of around, as you have seen, 19.9. It could vary from 18.5 to 16.5. It's a reducing DCP. So anything about 15.5%, you are good. If you achieve anything of that sort, you are good in terms of crude protein. So I've actually made a video on how to calculate that DCP in my previous videos. If you go through my channels, you will see, maybe I'll leave a link here so that you see how you calculate, we arrive at this crude protein percentages like that. So let's go back to that percentages and then calculate to see how much maize in terms of kilos you need for this particular period. So let's just go back to our calculator. So in the first place, you can see we need 8 bags like that of 90 kg, 90 kg bags of maize like that. So let's go to phase 2. That's the growers phase. Now the growers phase, from this table, let's go back to this feeding table. This is actually provided by the Isa Brown, the Hendrix genetics, which provides, it's responsible for this breed of layers that we have here, the Isa Brown. So this is actually the feeding schedule. It has been proven. They have gone through different stages, different environments for chicks, and I've seen that this is the best feeds or quantity of feeds to give to the birds. Now let's look at from 8 weeks, the 8th week all the way to the 16th week. Look at that. So just go down like that, and then so we have that. So this is a very proven data feeding program. It's a very proven feeding program. Let's go that week 8 all the way to week 16. So let me just highlight that week 16. So you need a total of what? No, let's just mark week 15. Week 15, yeah. Week 15, because week 9 is also included. So you need a total of 5,068 grams. 5,068 grams. That is for one chick. So it means in the 15th week, one chick should have consumed 5. That is 5 kilos. That's 5,000, roughly 5 kilos of feeds. Now that is from week 8, where it has consumed 1.8. As you can see, 1.8 kgs all the way to 5.06 kilos. That is the 15th week, by the end of that 15th week, like that. So not that I'm not including the 16th week, because this is these totals are for the whole week. So if I include the 16th week, those should be 9 weeks, but I don't want to include that. So we'll start from the 9th week like that, and then we subtract the 15th week like that. So go back to our calculator, and then we get 5,000. Just cancel that. You get 5,068. 5,068, and then we are subtracting for week 8. That is 1,800. So subtracting 1,883 grams. So you get a total of what? 3,181 grams. 3,185 grams in this case. Now, if you convert that to kilos, that should just be 3.1 or 3.2 kilos in this case. So just do that. So you can just cancel that. So that should be 3.18 kilos, and then you multiply that by the 1,000 birds that you have. So 1,000. So this is an assumption that the birds survived, all of them survived, and then we have maybe a few 20 extra just to, to keep the birds at 1,000, like that. So what do you get? So 3,180 kilos, 3,180 kilograms. So which roughly translates to 3 tons. That is 3 tons of feeds, like that. Now, if you get, let's go back to this table to see in the growers phase, what is the percentage? So the quantity of whole maize you need for this particular session is actually 20 kgs per 100 kilos of feeds. So which means 20% of that. Now, as you go back to the calculator, you multiply that by 20 or like that. just multiply that by we just get a percentage of it. What is 20% of that? So multiply by 0.2, like that, and then you get what? 636 kilos of maize. So if you quickly divide that divided by 90 kgs, just to see how many bags of maize you'll need or you'll buy, you get 7. You see, 7. So far 15 bags are gone of maize. 15 bags are gone of maize, and then you can arrange how much to get for the next session. So which brings us to the third phase. Now at this particular time you are done with the 4 months and your birds are ready to lay. Some maybe 1 or 2 could have started laying. I've seen cases where birds start laying very early, 16th week, 17th week they start laying. But in this case you're assuming that now don't lay. So that's why you go to the pre-lay phase, which is around 3 weeks. And there are a bit of changes in terms of feeds and the feeds quantity and what to include and what not to include in terms of calcium and the quantities of maize, like that. So let's look at these target points. So like that. So 16 to 18 weeks, 16 week being included. So that should be 3 weeks in total. So that is what's called the pre-lay phase. That means the period between growing and laying. That is the pre-lay. So the target DCP, or crude protein in that case, is actually 16.5% to 17%. You see, so if you can achieve a DCP of that percentage, it means you are good to go like that. So another bullet point or a very important point to note is that there's a reduction in energy content by a small fraction. Just a small fraction, yeah, a reduction in energy content by a small fraction, as you can see, we'll see. And then there's an increase in fiber feeds. Similarly, there isn't a much difference with this one. There isn't much different to the growers phase, where there was we had a lot of fiber in the feeds. And then there is an increased quantity. Also, there's a point that which notes that increase the quantity of feeds given so that the pullets can develop their reproductive organs fully in preparation for laying. So yeah, so the pullets can develop their reproductive organs fully in preparation for laying. So know that at this point that the organs, this is the point of the last 3 weeks is the point where the reproductive organs of the chickens actually grow, mature enough, the oviduct, the ova, all that mature well, and they are fully developed so that they can be ready to pass the egg, like that. And then another important point is that at this point you are expecting eggs, therefore we'll have to increase the calcium content in our feeds. So slightly by 2 to 2%, 2.5% in the diet, like that. So which means you don't want to have soft shell eggs. You want chicks which have lay very hard, hard shell eggs in this case, like that. So look at the quantity of maize that you need for those 3 weeks. So just what, 20 kilos, more so the same for the growers phase. And then there's a slight difference in terms of maize jam that you have been using, or wheat bran or wheat jam, like that, or wheat pollard that you have been using in this case. So there's a slight reduction by 5 kilos to 45 kgs, like that. Now I'll not talk about the other things, but the important thing is here to note that the calcium content has actually increased, and that's why you're seeing a 3 kg calcium when you're making 100 kilos of feeds for that particular period. Okay, so keeping in mind a DCP of around 16.5 to 17%, that's as your target. Let's go to this table, the feeding schedule. No, that's actually the calculator. Let's go to the feeding schedule to see how many kilos of feeds one chick should have, or in this case it's actually a chicken, should have consumed between the 16th, as you can see it's highlighted there, between the 16th and 18th weeks. So those are 3 weeks. So let's see. So we'll just subtract the 18th week because I don't have the data for the 19th week. The 18th week minus the 16th week. I don't think I'll do that. Rather, I'll have to multiply the quantities, each of those quantities, the 80, 86, and then 95 kilos by, by 7, yeah. Multiply that by 7. Okay, so we multiply that by, we get the total, just cancel that, go to a calculator. That is 80, you add 86, and then we add the last one being 95. I'm taking the maximum value possible so that you don't underfeed the birds in this particular case, or maybe you don't buy less feed like that. Now it's better to have more feeds remaining than have than buying less feeds, so that you don't want to make those round trips to the market like that. So we get a total of what? 261. Now multiply this by 7 because it is 3 weeks of that. So 3 weeks of that, each of them having 7 days. Okay, so multiply that by 7 so that we get the total quantity the chicken should have eaten within those 3 weeks, like that. So that is what? 1.8 kilos, 1.82 kilos. So within those 3 weeks, you should have eaten 1.82 kilos. Now, let's multiply that by, you have 1,000 birds. Multiply that by 1,000. You see, so that is 1.87, 1.8, I mean around that up to 1.83, and then multiply by 1,000. Keep typing 10k. Okay, 1,000 like that, and then you get the total there, which is 1,830 kilos. So there are 1.8 tons of feeds for the last 3 weeks before you actually expect eggs. You start receiving before they start dropping eggs. Now, if you take, let's go back to our table, see what's the percentage of maize for that particular phase of 3 weeks. Is actually 20%. That is per 100 kilos. So 20 kgs per 100 kilos, which means 20% of that. So multiply this by 20 by, that is 0.2 to get what? The total of 366 kilos. So of the 1,830 kilos, 366 kgs of that will be maize. So if you get, now you can quickly convert this into, maybe divide by 90, so that you get around, I think 4 bags. So those are 4 bags you need for the last phase before the chickens start dropping eggs. So you have noted that you will need a total of 8 bags in the first phase. So if you just go back to here, you need 8 bags, and then that is the starter phase, 8 bags of maize, that is a 90 kg bags, and then grower phase you also need another 7, that is 15, and then the pre-lay phase you will need another 4, which gives you a total of 19. Now, to be on the safe side, you can just buy 20 bags. If you want to, just be on the safe side, 20 bags of 90 kg bags or more. Now, depending on the way money is coming into your business, that's how you can plan it. But all in all, guys, that's what you need: 20 bags of 90 kg kilos, 90 kilos of maize for that particular session to actually make before the chickens actually start laying. That's from the first week all the way to 18th weeks, like that. So and then the next phase, guys, should be about the laying period. That should be from 18 weeks. There are a few pointers there, but I don't want to make this video so long, but let's end it there. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like, share, and I'll be pinning more videos on check out how we calculate this crude protein in this particular case.